to a joint program of the Media, Meta-Providence, Swarthmore, Springfield, who am I forgetting? Everyone, okay, that's everyone, chapters of Birdtown. Birdtown is a Pennsylvania-based program that it's a consortium of municipalities across the state that are interested and committed to improving their local habitat for birds and educating their residents about the importance of supporting birds. We're also very fortunate to have volunteers from the Tri-State Bird Rescue. They do fantastic work, and they are one of the few organizations that do the sort of bird rescue work in the region. So I'm here to welcome Marcy Engleman. She is the Senior Coordinator for Conservation Education at the John James Audubon Center in Mill Grove.
All right, wonderful. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Marcy. I work at the John James Audubon Center, which, if you're not familiar with Audubon, is right north of Valley Forge and King of Prussia. Excuse me. It only took me a little less than a half an hour to get here, so it wasn't very far. And at John James Audubon Center, we do have a museum visitor center, which is quite lovely, and it's dedicated to teaching about birds and the legacy of John James Audubon. We do, on the days that we're open, we do house tours. John James Audubon lived on the grounds for about 3 years in the beginning of the 1800s, and we have his house on the property. So every day at 1 o'clock from Wednesday to Sunday, we do tours of his house with our docents. And yeah, it's a wonderful place to learn about birds and Audubon's legacy. But specifically what I'm going to talk about today are owls, one of my favorite species of birds. You can see on this photograph by Brad Wilson that you see all the variety of owls, but there are a lot of things that owls have in common. So this is a picture of a barred owl, B-A-R-R-E-D, named for the bar-like stripes on her chest. And what I'm going to do now is go through a bunch of things that all owls have in common. I have some really cool artifacts that I'm going to use during this presentation, which after the program is over, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit so you guys can come up and see it up close, take a picture, touch it if you want to. They're all touchable. And I have a special friend with me that I will bring out in a little bit, so you'll have to wait for that. So some of these things may be a little bit technical. I apologize, kiddos, if this is a little too technical, but I want to talk to all ages. So most owls belong to one family. It's called Strigidae, and they're called the true owls. And then there is a group called Titanidae, which are the barn owls, which is this one over here. There are a few very subtle differences between the two. The major differences is true owls have a round face. Barn owls have a heart-shaped face. These guys, barn owls, have slightly longer legs, but also on their feet, they have, all owls have 3 toes that go to the front and 1 toe that goes to the back, helps them to grip. But on the barn owl, the middle toe has serrations on it like a knife. I'm assuming that helps in catching their prey. I'm not quite sure, but true owls don't have that feature. But when I talk about the features of the owl, it goes for all owls. Most of them are nocturnal. Which one of you kids wants to tell me what nocturnal means? In the front here with the Penn State sweatshirt on. You sleep during the day, you're awake at night. There are a few that are awake during the day. Snowy owls are one that are awake during the day. There's also a beautiful little guy called a burrowing owl that come from the southwest and the south. They tend to live in more deserty type regions. They're awake during the day, but that's mostly because that's when their food is awake. So they kind of take advantage of that. But in order to hunt at night, they have some very special adaptations, and one of them is their eyesight. They have very sharp eyesight. I've heard lots of people say they can see this, they can see that. I'll tell you the one that I've heard, that they can see a mouse at the opposite end of a football field with 1 candle worth of light. Take that with a grain of salt, okay? Not 100% how sure that is, but they have excellent vision at night, and I'll show you why in a moment. Their eyes are huge compared to the size of their skull. So, 1 second. If an owl were the same size as a human, their eyes would be this big. These are softballs. Okay? So by having eyes this big, you can see really, really well. Obviously, the bigger the eyes, the better you can see. Okay? They also have, I'm going to go back over to the podium now. They also have a very special thing, a third eyelid. A lot of animals have this. They have a top and a bottom eyelid like you do, but then they have a third eyelid called a nictitating membrane that goes from side to side, and it's clear. They can see through it. And that protects their eye when they're eating, so their eyes don't get scratched. A lot of swimming animals have this, and when they go to swim, they close it so it acts like goggles. So they can see while they're swimming, but it protects their eyes. So owls have these. There is a little saying that I like to use that goes like this. Eyes on the front, I like to hunt. Eyes on the side, I like to hide. So that's how you can tell if an animal is a predator or a prey. That goes for mammals and birds, doesn't really work for reptiles too much. But because their eyes are on the front, they have what's called good binocular vision. They have depth perception. They can tell how far away things are, and that way they don't crash into things while they're flying around at night. So they have great binocular vision. But their prey, for example, like a mouse, his eyes are on the side. He can see all around him, but he doesn't have binocular vision. So he can't tell how far away things are. So he trades one for the other. You can also see from the picture on the side there, this one over here, the owl looking directly behind him. A lot of people say, oh yeah, I heard that owls can turn their heads all the way around. I'm going to dispel that myth for you right there. Think about what would happen if you turned your head all the way around. Break your neck. But owls can turn their heads farther than we can because they have twice as many neck bones. We have 7, they have 14. And by having 14 neck bones, it allows them to rotate their head about 270 degrees. Yeah, so they can look directly behind them and a little farther, and then whip their head back around and look the other direction. So it looks like they can turn it all the way around, but they can't. If you've ever seen an animal's eyes shine, not just owls, your cat, a deer, a cow, they have a shiny surface on the back of their eye behind their retina. This is the fancy word for it, tapetum lucidum. And it reflects the light around inside their eyes and makes it brighter so that they can see better in the dark. Okay? Actually, let me go back one. For those of you that are familiar with how eyes work, you have rods and cones on the back of your eye. Rods help you see black and white, cones see color. That's how you remember to see, cones, color. These guys have way more rods than we do and less cones. So they're not great at seeing color, but they're excellent at seeing black and white and gray tones. And that also helps them to see in the dark. I'm sure you're aware it's really hard to see color in the dark. It has to do with the wavelengths of light. So they have more rods than we do. Hang on to your questions for just a little bit. I will get to you, I promise. These guys are hunters. They are predators. They have some really great adaptations to help them hunt. One of which are their claws. Go over here now. some of your kiddos were up here observing this piece of artifact. This is the leg of a great horned owl. The talons, which are another name for the claws, very, very sharp. So pretty much once they seize their prey, they've done their job. I'll explain why it's so feathery down to the tips of the toes in a moment, but the surface of the pads of the feet are kind of scaly, almost like a fish, and that helps grip their prey. Okay? But another thing that's very important is their strength. So I'm going to use this grip meter, and I'm going to test some of you to see how strong you are. No shaming. Okay? This measures in a unit called pounds per square inch, which if you've ever done any type of carpentry or anything like that, you know about strength, pounds per square inch. There we go, pounds per square inch. So why don't you squeeze this with one hand as hard as you can. Okay, you may let go. You got, 29.4. That's really good. That's really good. I want you to do it. I told him I would let him do it. Okay, one hand, squeeze as hard as you can. Oh, hold on, let me start it again. Harder, harder, harder. Okay, let go. 32.4, good job. Now, do I have an adult male or female that would like to try it out? I'm not shaming. Okay. Doesn't matter. Is it working? Oh, son of a gun, hold on. Okay. Okay, you got, let's go. Okay, you may let go. 31. Awesome. Anybody else? Go for it. One hand. Okay, you got 44. These are good numbers. These are good numbers. That's pretty normal for humans. Some people can go a little higher, but a great horned owl can do between 200 and 500. So, again, that's why I'm not shaming, because nobody's going to beat a great horned owl. So they're very, very strong, and when they seize their prey, it pretty much does its job and dies. Yeah. Oh, let me get my clicker real quick. Sorry, I like to walk and talk, and I like to be stuck behind a podium. Another thing is the beak. I have a model here of a great horned owl skull, which it is a little small, but when you think about it, they're covered in feathers, and feathers are floofy, and it adds size. But if you were to remove the feathers, their skull is actually quite small. They have a very, very sharp beak. The edges are sharp and the front is pointy. This is for potentially ripping into prey, but for the most part, sometimes owls swallow their prey whole. But for a larger prey, they would have to tear it into pieces. So they use their sharp beak to do that. Okay. One other thing about this skull, there's so many things, but one other thing, when I was talking about the eyes, if you look at this skull, you'll notice that there are these rings in the orbits, in the eye sockets. Owls can't move their eyes. Their eyes are fixed facing forward. So if they want to look from side to side, they have to turn their whole head, and that's why they need to rotate their head as far as they can, because they can't move their eyes. Okay. The disc-shaped face. This is important. They have a rounded face. It actually helps them hear. On the sides of their eyes, they have their ear holes. So one is here, one is here, kind of right here and here. And what happens is the rounded feathers, like this, act like your ear and funnels all the sound into the ear hole and magnifies it and makes it louder. This right here, it's a little hard to see, I apologize, but they're lifting up the disc of feathers, and there's the ear hole right there. Ear holes are also asymmetrical. They're not the same. One points up and out this way, one points down and in this way. So they don't face the same direction. that helps them triangulate on their prey. So they can tell which direction it's coming from and where they have to go catch it. I have seen video, I'm sure you could find it if you looked on YouTube, of an owl. They put it in an enclosure and set free a mouse, and it was able to catch it in total darkness just by using its ears. They're amazing hunters. Speaking of which, they have silent flight. This is also very important because they hunt at night. If they made any noise, it would scare their prey away. So they fly silently so they can sneak up on their prey. And how they are able to do this has to do with their feathers. Right here is the wing of a great horned owl. And I encourage you, when I'm done, if you'd like to come up to the table to see this for yourself, you can, because you can see it with your eye. You don't need a magnifying glass. The edge of the feathers, the leading edge of the feathers that's going forward, is fringy. If you were to look at, for example, this feather, which comes from a turkey vulture, they don't have that fringe. It's a solid edge. Turkey vultures don't need to be quiet. They eat stuff that's already dead, so they don't have to sneak up on anything. So when they flap their wings, it makes a lot of noise. Owls have a fringy edge to their feathers, and it breaks up the air as it goes over the wing and creates turbulence, and that is quiet. Okay, it breaks up that turbulence into little eddies, and it's very quiet. So there's the fringy edge right there. This is the edge of a dove. Again, doves aren't quiet. So they have a solid edge versus a fringy edge. I have a demonstration for you to show how that works. So I have a yardstick to represent the vulture's wing. So if we listen carefully, I'm gonna swing it in a circle. I'm gonna back up so I don't hit anybody. That's pretty loud. That's really loud. But this yardstick has been covered with a fuzzy sock. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this guy. Try and keep the sock on. No noise. So that's kind of how that works. Pretty cool. All right, one more thing I'm going to talk about before I get out my special friend is their diet. These guys are predators, so they eat other animals for food. Depending on the size of the bird, will tell you the size of the food that it eats. Some of our smaller owls eat smaller food, like tiny mice or even insects. Some of our larger owls will eat larger food. One of the great horned owl's favorite foods is skunk. First of all, I know, it sounds gross, and they smell awful, but owls can't smell. Most birds can't smell. The only birds I know of that have a very good sense of smell are vultures, for kind of obvious reasons. They're looking for dead stuff that stinks. But most birds can't smell. So, and skunks are easy to find. They have running stripes down their back. So they're easy to see in the dark. So they hunt for skunks. Rabbits, mice, shrews, other birds, things like that. They consume their food whole. Or if it's very large, they will rip it into pieces and swallow it whole. Bones, fur, feathers, and all. But their stomach can't digest it all. So what they do is, their stomach, they have a crop here first. The crop is just like a hamster's cheeks. It holds onto the food. Then it goes down into their actual stomach, which has two parts. The proventriculus and the gizzard. The gizzard does the digestion, and then anything that the bird can't digest, like the feathers, the bones, the fur, gets compacted into this little thing called a pellet, which then the bird coughs up. So this is a pellet from a great horned owl. It's pretty big. I've seen bigger. Some of the bigger owls will make bigger pellets. But this is basically all the stuff he couldn't digest. And ask your kids, a lot of the kids have done this in school, you dissect this, and it tells you what they've been eating. Very cool, excellent, good stuff. Neat story if you want to tell your teachers this, if you did, you talked to your teacher that you dissected the pellets with. Years ago, there was a species of vole, V-O-L-E, which is kind of like a mouse, that scientists thought was extinct. Until they started dissecting owl pellets and they found the bones of this particular vole. They were looking in the wrong place in the wrong time. But they found that this wasn't extinct at all, it was pretty common, they just weren't finding it, but they found it in the owl pellets. So dissecting this isn't just something that school kids do, researchers do it too. And you can see our snowy owl here. Coughing one up. It's kind of alarming when they do it on your hand, like if I'm holding an owl and they cough. It's really alarming because you think they're dying or something, and they just kind of convulse and then they cough it back up. So that's kind of cool. All right, so I'm gonna get out my owl friend. Things that are appropriate when I have the owl out. Aww, I expect to hear that from you. Okay, loud noises are not great. Photography is fine. I would prefer no flash if possible, because that might bother her eyes. I will hang out with her after the program, so if you'd like to come up a little closer and get a photograph, you are welcome to. Okay, you won't be able to pet her or anything like that. She doesn't even like it when I do that. You ready, girlfriend? Good girl. Good girl. Thank you. Thank you. This is Abby. Abby is an eastern screech owl. And I will play for you in a moment why they are called a screech owl. Eastern screech owls are one of the smaller owls out there. Not the smallest owl, for sure, but the smallest owl in Pennsylvania is the saw-whet owl, which is a teeny bit smaller. But screech owls come in two different colors. Abby here is this beautiful rusty red color. They also come in gray. And it has nothing to do with male or female. It has nothing to do with anything. They just come in two different colors. Although it is true that farther north, they tend to be more gray. Farther south, they tend to be more red. And I think that has to do with camouflaging on the bark of the trees that are present. They get different trees down south than we do up here. Abby is what they call a non-releasable rehabilitated bird. Abby was born in the wild, but we believe she was attacked by a predator, which can happen when you're a small owl. And she has damage to her left eye. So a nice good Samaritan found her and took her to a rescue, similar to Tri-State, and they rehabilitated her, but they determined that she could not be released into the wild because her eyesight was not good enough to hunt. So she came to live with us at the Audubon Center and be one of our bird ambassadors to come out to programs like this and help teach you. I don't know why she's giving you the cold shoulder. Look at them, don't look at me. She lives with another screech owl named Oscar. Oscar is another one similar, but he was hit by a car. He lost his left eye. And then we got a new one, a new red one named Mortimer, which I think is a great bird name. And Mortimer, I'm not sure his backstory. We just got him a few months ago. He came to us from the Camden Aquarium. A lot of places had issues with using birds on programs because of the avian flu, if you heard about that. So the Camden Aquarium decided to stop using birds and gave us their two birds. They gave us Mortimer and they gave us a pigeon named Cece. Cece's very cute. So Abby is one of the types of owls that has feather tufts on the top of her head. They look like horns, and that's where the great horned owl gets his name, but they're actually not, they're just feathers. Birds don't have horns. They're just feathers. They may be there as part of camouflage. So when she is roosting during the day and sleeping, it kind of makes her look like part of the tree with some broken branches, kind of aids in the camouflage. But she can kind of move them. They can move their feathers. They have muscles that attach to their feathers, and they can move all their feathers. When they're cold, they puff up their feathers. If you've ever seen that, a bird will puff up its feathers to trap the warm air next to its body. When they're hot, they sleek their feathers down like this to let the hot air escape. So she can move her feather tufts back if she would like to. She is attached to me, so she can't fly away. Around her ankle, she has these little things called anklets that have a hole in them. Through the hole goes these little green things called jesses. It's like a little leash, and then they attach to this big leash, which is attached to my glove. So therefore, if she tried to fly away, she's not going to go anywhere. Right? Yeah. Let me play for you some owl calls so that you can be a little bit more familiar with what they sound like should you hear one at night. I'm going to walk back over to the podium to play some songs for you on the microphone. So let me open up. If you're not familiar with some of the apps that are available to you on your phone, Audubon has an app which acts as a brilliant field guide, and you can also play bird calls. But the one that you should really get is the Merlin app. The Merlin app, you can hit record while you're just standing there listening to birds, and it'll tell you what birds you're listening to. It's amazing. It was put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, so it's brilliant. So I highly, and they're both free. I'm not shilling for you. So let's listen to this and tell me if you've ever heard this before. Does anybody know what that is? Morning dove. Not an owl. Your first clue is that it's usually during the day, although they will call when it's starting to get dark, but that is not an owl. So let me get for you what a screech owl sounds like. Now the screech owl gets its name from its sound. It sounds like a screech. To me, it sounds like a horse or a ghost. Sounds like a horse. And that's a little trill. Okay? So that's the screech owl. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, girlfriend? You did. The great horned owl is the owl that does the typical hooting sound that you're familiar with. It's usually 5 to 7 hoots, very deep. Okay. Another owl that you could find around here is the barred owl, which I showed you earlier. The barred owl tends to like older growth forests, so you're not going to see it too much in the suburbs. But if you're out in the deep woods, you could hear them. If any of you are bird nerds, you know that we like to put words to bird calls because it helps you remember them. Okay? The barred owl sounds like it's saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for y'all?" Okay, that one, once you hear it, you will never forget it. And then the last one I want to play for you is the saw-whet. The saw-whet is the smallest owl in Pennsylvania. And the reason they say it's got its name, some of the kids may not be familiar with this terminology, but they say it sounds like you're sharpening a knife against a whetstone. I don't hear it. It's a bunch of toots. Not that kind of. Okay? So those are some of the owl calls. If you go on the Audubon app, or if you go on the Audubon website, which is just audubon.org, you can listen to some more bird calls. It's not just owls, it's every bird in the United States. You can listen to their call. You can attract owls to your area by putting up nest boxes. This is a screech owl box. It has to be a specific size with a specific size hole opening. I forget the number off the top of my head. But you can find the directions online how to make them. They're very easy to make. You just have to cut up a 2x4 or a 2x8. And then you make these little cuts. They're called kerf cuts, K-E-R-F. They help the owl cling to it because they won't sit on a perch. They'll cling to it like this. And then you may get lucky enough to attract a screech owl. Yeah, they think you're cute. I would like to share with you some of the other birds we have at the Audubon Center. Up until recently, these guys were quarantined, which means you couldn't go see them because of the avian flu. But the bird care coordinator just told me that we're opening up the quarantine. So when you come, you may be able to walk past the cages to see them. So on the left is Odin. Odin is our great horned owl. Odin is a non-releasable bird, but he was not injured in the wild. He was raised in captivity by a falconer. He was raised to be, they call it broody, to help raise other babies. I don't think it worked out real good, so he got surrendered to a rescue who then gave him to us. So he has no fear of humans. We feed him, we take care of him, we use him on programs like this. He has no fear of humans, but he never really learned to hunt, so he can't be released. And besides that, he never shuts up. He hoots and hoots and hoots and hoots and hoots. So he would give away his location. Not very good. This is Sherlock and me. Sherlock is our barred owl. Sherlock is non-releasable, I think also hit by car, but Sherlock is a little older and has been retired from programs. He's panting a little, or she's panting a little bit. She's a little nervous. I'm just gonna keep her a little closer to me. This is Oscar and Abby. Together, they live in a mew together. I don't have a picture of Mortimer on here just yet. Now this is not an owl, this is Hopper. Hopper is our broad-winged hawk. Broad-winged hawks are amazing to watch migrate. It's worth the trip if you want to go to Hawk Mountain. You see them migrate overhead by the thousands. Thousands. They fly in what's called a kettle. So they catch the thermals, which are the hot air coming off of the ground, and they rise up like a tornado. And then they soar down to the next hot air. And then they soar, and then they go up. So they never have to flap their wings. They're just gliding on hot air. But they will migrate by thousands. And she was hit by a car. She had to lose the tips of both wings. So she cannot fly. Therefore she hops, therefore her name, Hopper. This is Conrad. Conrad is a blue jay. He was also raised by a person as a pet, which is illegal. So don't ever do it. I don't know if he got in trouble or if he realized that he got himself into more than he could deal with and surrendered Conrad to a center, Tri-State Bird Rescue, who then gave him to us. So he has no fear of humans either. And then this is Cece, our pigeon. Cece was bred and born in captivity, so she is not a wild bird. Okay, and that's our cute burrowing owl. At this time, I would love to see if there are any questions. Yes?
Who are the owl's predators?
Owls' predators are larger hawks and other owls. Now, great horned owls don't really have predators, but a screech owl or a saw-whet owl could get preyed upon by a larger owl. Yes?
Are you allowed to pet Abby?
She does not like being petted just because she was born in the wild, so in her head she's a wild bird. She doesn't like to be touched. Yeah. Yes?
I have a question. I have both of those apps that you talked about.
Yes.
Bird calls are really wonderful. If I were to play that bird call, let's say with great horned owl,
Yes.
in the vicinity where I'm, would another great horned owl answer?
It could happen. A lot of people do that. In some locations, it is illegal to do that, like in national parks. You're not allowed to use bird calls.
I'm in my backyard.
In your backyard, go for it.
The other question is, because they're not nocturnal, seeing them in the wild is very difficult.
Yes.
I I would presume the best time to go looking for them would be dawn and dusk.
Dawn and dusk is great, or a little after dusk when it's pretty dark outside. During the day, if you want to find a sleeping one, look for larger trees, look for streaks of poop down the bark, and look for pellets at the base of the tree. That gives away their location.
And I think, look, from my own experience, I did have one experience with one.
Yeah.
If you come up on one and he's sitting in the hollow of a tree, you don't even know it's there until it jumps at you. They're invisible.
Yeah, they are really good at hide and seek. What are you looking at?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you feed her?
She gets fed mice. We actually chop the mice into smaller pieces to make it easier for them to eat it.
Feed her once a day?
Once a day, they get fasted. Do you get fasted? I'm trying to remember. Some of our birds get fasted once a week because they're a little overweight. So there's one day a week we don't feed them. I don't think Abby's one of those. I think Odin is, our great horned owl, because he's kind of junky. Don't tell him I said that. Yes?
Are there any specific types of trees that they prefer, and how high will you look for them? Asking for permission.
Okay. The bigger owls like the bigger trees. They do like hollows. If you find a dead tree, which we call a snag, if it's got a hollowed out center, you might find an owl there. The owls on our property are nesting in sycamores. They love sycamores, but any old tree, fat tree, not like skinny little twigs. Even guys like this are gonna like the old growth trees. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about her, like, fluffy face.
Her fluffy face, yeah, she's got a fluffy face. They kind of look like whiskers a little bit. They're just feathers, so just little feather tufts, but it aids in the silent flight. Yes?
Did great hornbills ever have like predators in the past that might not be in the area, like cougars and wolves?
Right. I don't know of any predators of great horned owls just because they are so large. In the past, like hundreds of years ago, maybe if there was something larger out there, but they're pretty safe. As babies, they could be picked off. But as an adult, I don't think there's anything that preys on a great horned owl. Shoot, I was just going to say something and it went out of my brain. I saw a hand. Yes?
Mostly territorial, but they stay in the same.
Yes. The owls do tend to stay in the same area. And a lot of times they hoot to tell other owls to get out of their backyard. Yeah, they are territorial. Over here.
How much does she weigh?
Oh, she weighs not much. Birds in general don't weigh a lot because they have hollow bones. The ones that fly, at least. Like ostriches and stuff are really heavy. But she weighs, let me think about this. I'm trying to remember when she was weighed last. Probably about 100, 120 grams. So she weighs, I'm trying to think, less than a glass of water. Yes, ma'am.
So the internet has told me that you could like lift their feathers up and their legs are much longer than you expect. Is
Yeah.
that true of all owls?
I think a lot of them it's true. I'm not going to try it on Abby just because she doesn't like being touched. But they do have pretty long legs. You got to think about it. The feathers are huge and they take up a lot of space. If you've ever seen a wet owl, it's pretty miserable looking. But you can see how tiny they are compared. Oh, by the way, if you ever see a pair of birds and you're not sure if one's male, one's female, whatever, females are larger than males because they're the ones that incubate the nest. So a larger owl, if you see a great horn that's pretty big, it's probably a female. Yes, ma'am. With a green shirt. Abby can fly just fine, but she won't right now because she knows she's not going to get anywhere. But yes, Abby can fly. Yes.
So if you put up like a screech owl house, what's a good spot?
It's going to be near the woods. I don't know if it needs to be facing the woods or facing away from the woods. I don't know if that much matters. But you might not want it facing the sun directly because it's going to bake them. So sometimes a little bit in the shade would probably be preferable. Yeah. Yes?
So other birds usually have like long feathers in the back. but she's like very truncated.
Yes.
Is that a common trait of owls?
Yes, they tend to have a shorter tail. The tail tends to be shorter and a little broader. It helps them as they fly, acts like a rudder and helps them fly. But it's not decorative like some birds' tails are for attracting a mate because they can't really see it at night anyway, so. Yes, yes,
What height would a bird box be
sorry about that.
ideal for an owl?
I think at least 10 feet. Yeah, maybe more. Yeah.
The higher the better.
Higher the better. Yeah. But again, when you look up the directions on how to construct it, it will tell you specifically. But I think for owls, it's pretty high. Yeah. Yes.
Average lifespan of an owl.
Great question. Owls in captivity live longer than their counterparts do in the wild. So in the wild, a bird like this might live up to 8 to 10 years. Maybe a little longer, maybe 12. But in captivity, they could live close to 20, maybe longer. Yeah, great horned owls could live over 30 in captivity because they're cared for. They don't have to deal with the elements or predators or starvation.
I know the ones in captivity get used to human handling, but do they kind of get to know you?
I think they do know individuals, and I'll tell you why I know that. I used to work at the Elmwood Park Zoo in Norristown a million years ago, and we had a barred owl named Ophelia. And Ophelia and I got along great. She would step up on my glove, and she even let me scratch her neck a little bit. She was great. But my coworker Bob, she hated him. Because, there's a reason, he was walking with her like this, and he slipped on some ice and fell. Now, she never hit the ground. He went like this with his hand, but she remembered that. So I think they do recognize individuals. And if she saw him coming from across the zoo, she would hiss and puff up her feathers. Yeah, yeah. So they can recognize individuals. Yeah. Yes?
So from a lot of the literature, most of it children's, they're always depicted as wise birds. Is there any reason they ain't smarter than any other birds, or do they all just have bird brains?
They have bird brains. Yes, because their eyes are so large, it takes up most of their skull. So they have very little room left for brains. So they're very instinctual animals. So they're no more smart or dumb than any other bird. But they're certainly not wise. Yes?
Do they ever react or interact back and forth with any of the owls you have on the property?
Yes.
That are wild?
Yes. We have great horned owls that nest very close to where they live. And our great horned owl, Odin, will call to them. And I've heard stories of him trying to offer food to them, maybe trying to attract a female. I've heard stories, I've never seen it. But yes, they do interact with the wild birds by calling. And a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a program, and we had a very large female red-tailed hawk perching on Hopper's cage, our broadwing hawk. Very large. Hopper was beside herself because it was much bigger than she was. But no harm because the cage is very well constructed, but they can't get to her.
Is there any documentation of how many owls there are?
I'm sure there is documentation. I couldn't tell you exactly number-wise. Right. Certain areas would be monitored. At the Audubon Center, we're getting something called a MOTUS tower, M-O-T-U-S. And MOTUS towers are located all over the country, and they help follow tagged birds. And some birds that are tagged give us an indication of how well the population is doing. If you go on the Audubon website, audubon.org, and you look up the Bird Migration Explorer, it shows you the migration of tagged birds. Many different species. It's a really fun tool, so I highly recommend that.
I was with some owls once that were in a huge cage out in New York, and they clicked at me a lot. Is that like a threat?
It's a little bit like kind of back off, leave me alone. They click their beak. Yeah, it's like a threat display, but you don't have to be worried about it. Yeah, because they don't really attack humans. So, but yeah, a lot of birds click their beak for one reason or another. I have a parrot. He clicks his beak when he's happy. So, all right, what I'm going to do. Oh, one more. Yeah.
I I've heard stories of owls coming down and taking wool caps off of people. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't heard of that. I'm not saying it's not true, but I haven't heard of it. Just because if it's not a moving animal, the owl's not going to really be able to focus on it. So let's say you're sitting in a chair with a coonskin cap on, like they're not going to be able to focus on that because it's not a moving, rustling animal. So it might be an old wives' tale. Yeah. So I'm going to encourage, if you would like to come up and see my artifacts up close and touch them, you're welcome to it. You can also take some closer up pictures of Abby if you would like to. I'm going to stand behind the table. You can stand on the front of the table. I just don't want to get too close to her because she's already a little nervous. And be careful, she did a mess on the floor. Can't really potty train owls. So thank you so much for your time and attention this afternoon. I really appreciate it. My pleasure. Yeah. Go back in the box. Go ahead. Go ahead. There you go. Good girl.
Perfect.